Hello everyone, Strategic Sage here with some pretty major news from AI War 2 regarding expansions that's just been announced in the last few days. If you want to see all the official pronouncements and press releases, links to that in the description below. But what they're going to be doing is the Neinzul Abyss will be coming up somewhere around October. It's the third DLC, and that's going to be the last one. At that point, they're going to basically cease primary development. Chris is still going to be doing some light support for the game, but it's going to stop with the new expansions and new features and all of that at that stage, and he's going to move on to another project. So why is this happening? At that point, it'll be about 2 years since AI War 2 was launched, and it's done somewhat better since the second DLC, the Zenith Onslaught, but it is still not profitable, and there doesn't seem to be a good path for it to become that. It's just not popular enough to really make it worth the effort. There are also some personal issues and health concerns, which I can't go into a lot of detail about, but that has sort of made it more urgent to make this move. But really, it was sort of coming anyway. Aside from the various decisions in terms of which direction to take the game over the course of development, there's simply the fact that a lot of an independent game being successful is down to timing and luck. For whatever reason, AI War 2 did not catch lightning in a bottle the way that Fleet Command did. They've done some consolidation of what the features in that are going to be. Some of the planned elements have been scrapped, and they're trying to focus on what they think is the best feature set to put into that final DLC. And it will, as the name implies, definitely be heavily focused on the Neinzul. Another aspect that has basically hit the chopping block is the various modes that we've talked about, Expert, Challenger, Death Wish, etc. As of now, the plan is still to try to put a basic version of the fuel stations in and see how things go, but I think it would take a lot more testing and tweaking to really make that whole aspect ready for prime time, and it doesn't look like there's going to be time for that, so that's probably going to end up being scrapped. As to the current state of the game, multiplayer is still looking to be finished. They think it's pretty close to coming out of beta, although we've thought that before. Work on that does still continue. Right now, the entire patch process has an extended beta period for a few reasons. There are some memory leaks they wanted to try to combat, and the ways they went around fixing that ended up causing some more downstream bugs, so they're working through all that. I highly recommend staying on the most recent stable branch instead of the Steam beta at this current time until all that's sorted out, unless you want to help test and bug fix. There was a Unity engine upgrade and things of that nature. There's some good stuff in the beta, it's just not stable and ready yet. While we're here, I'm going to do a rundown of the recent patch updates, just the high points. And the last one of these that I did was from about 2.8, so that was right before the Zenith Onslaught expansion. We're now up to 3.3 on stable, and that's the period I'm going to cover, actually up to about 3.5 with the beta, but we will wait to cover that until it comes out of beta. So, we have, obviously, various patches having to do with the Zenith Onslaught expansion, tweaking everything. There's also been added something called the distributed economy. And what that means is your economic power is not focused so much on your command station anymore. The mining harvesters, or in this case, they're now called asteroid mining power plants, these are much more significant than they were. You can see they produce energy and metal, and there are varying amounts of them in the different systems. And what that does is, for example, Bullock over here has 10 of them. So this would be a very good system. We'd want to get an economic command station there if we could. But if it's exposed to the enemy, then that could be a problem. So there's more flux. Systems are valuable in economic ways as well as being valuable for what you can capture or hack in them. Another example of this is over here in Padronis, which only has 2, sort of on the other end of the scale. And this would normally be a system where maybe you'd capture these 2 and take this one for the fun and make that an economic system behind. But that would not work very well here because it just doesn't have the oomph available. So, the economic value of a system is now tied more to those power plants, and its location in the galaxy is not the only consideration. It also has its own innate capabilities. We also have now variable grav well sizes. The actual area inside each planet can scale pretty dramatically depending on what settings you use. It can be fairly close together, or it can be widely variant. And just sort of a word of warning to that does mean that it takes a lot more time to pass through systems. So traveling from one end of the galaxy will take longer if you have to go through a bunch of large grav wells. On the other hand, it can give you a big advantage over the AI because, for example, range is much more powerful in larger systems, but the AI still relies on the strength rating, and so it's not really going to adjust as much to that as the player could. So some people really like that. Some people think it's, they'd rather just stick with the smaller size. It's really variant in perspective. But I think it really does unbalance the game quite a bit. It's one of those features that sort of sounds better on paper than it actually is in practice, in my opinion. Now, we've also got some interface changes that have happened. We've got this whole tip section here where it's too early in this game, but there's a whole bunch of them that can show up. If you've seen the playthrough I've done with the Zany Zenith, it's got a whole bunch of those that have happened there that we've seen. But that's helpful for new players. And then we have also the tooltips have been revamped with a variety of icons, and you can see the header there. It's trying to summarize all your key stats for it. That's still sort of in process. Sir Limbo's done a lot of really good work on this, trying to make that more accessible and less just of an incomprehensible wall of text for people. And then there have been some balance changes. Another one that I'm not a huge fan on is the Fallen Spire. If you are familiar with them, have played with them, basically they are stronger now. They have more firepower, they have more hull strength, and they're quite a bit faster. Some new players were finding that they were kind of hard to deal with. But from my perspective, the Fallen Spire is supposed to be something that totally changes the way the game is played. It's not really supposed to be a baseline entry point for new players. And a lot of the idea was, yeah, they're slow, but you get local superiority with your force, the strategic deployment of everything. When they're up to a moderate speed now at 1,000 speed, that just sort of takes away the whole aspect of it. So while they are stronger, and it's always fun to have your power trip and play with powerful ships, in my opinion, that was probably a change that would have been best left out. And finally, a couple more adjustments that have been made. This one is my fault completely. So if you don't like it, then blame me, because it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't pushed for it. The arcs have been scaled up in their energy requirements to about 100k each, and the golems to about 200k each. Typically before that, we had about 7,000 for the arcs and 50,000 for the golems. Meanwhile, the player's economic power was scaling up with some boosts to the Econ command stations, boosts to the Zenith power generator, which I still think is overpowered, etc. And that at least makes it now so that your super weapons, you have to pay a price. There is an investment in them for the extreme power that you get. Not enough of one, but nonetheless, it is still there. And then there have also been some adjustments to high difficulty elements, such as the wormhole invasions and the so-called Shark B exo waves that you get when you lose a command station. Those have been scaled up difficulty 8 and higher. The wormhole invasions are the same, but they actually come in at a lower AIP level, and then the volume of those Shark B waves has been increased. And you also can't change, just a pinning mechanic is what it's called. You can't change your command station, transform it to a different type when there's a wave inbound to the planet or more than one strength of the enemy on the planet. And that basically just gets rid of a lot of gaminess that some people were doing with, trying to pull a bunch of enemy in with an economic command station, then switch it to military and get the firepower attack bonus you get from that and clean up a bunch of the enemy in that way. It's a lot more difficult to bait the hunter, at least in that specific way, than it was before. So I think that's pretty much a good summary of where we're at now. As always, any questions, if there's any patch changes I didn't cover that you'd like to hear me talk about, go ahead and leave that down in the comments below. But otherwise, when we get set on the beta, the Zany Zenith series will continue, and I will also be looking at further patch changes